founder and CEO of FairCompare.com, with episode number 54 of our weekly video podcast.
Hey, Rick, I'm Ann McDermott, of course, your color commenter. And I just wanted to add a little quick color. I just got back from my first trip since joining PreCheck. And I was all excited. And I said to the guy when I got to the airport, I said, "Where's your PreCheck lane?" And he said, "We don't have one." So sometimes when you go to a small enough airport, you are not going to get it. However, one good thing about PreCheck, and I don't know if this is coincidence, but I suspect not. I was PreChecked. I was traveling with my husband. He was PreChecked throughout every flight we took as well. So that's a good thing to consider.
Was that Burbank? Was that the airport you were at?
That was Burbank. There was no PreCheck line. Now, maybe it's because it was early in the morning. I'm not sure. But I will say the regular line was real fast. I mean, it is the fall season. So, I had no problem. And it was great when I did get PreCheck. So
it's been a while since I've been through that airport. It's a great little bitty airport there.
It is.
Also, and during the podcast, we're going to take a question from a customer. And we'll also go over our Adventurist event of the week. A little Halloween spirit coming up here shortly with our native app and that content on our website at Adventurist. So
let's get to it. First of all, let's talk about this airfare hike. We haven't had as many hike attempts as we have in previous years, have we?
Yeah, actually, I was going through the data. I actually went through the entire year's worth of data yesterday because I wanted to catch up. And it turns out over the year, and sometimes I decide whether or not I want certain Canadian hikes to enter into the chart or not. So it's sort of at my discretion. But I came up with about 14 attempted airfare hikes with 4 successes so far this year, with United starting one last Wednesday. Luckily for us consumers, it actually rolled back over the weekend. And let's talk a little bit about what airfare hikes mean. So when airlines try to hike fares, a couple things happen. First, one airline typically launches and changes. In my case, I'm looking for about 2/3 of all domestic airfares. So typically they would raise that anywhere from $2 to, say, I don't know, $7. I've seen it as high as $7, but typically it's between $2 and $5 each way, depending on, sometimes the longer routes are more expensive, like in the $5 range, the shorter routes in the $2 rounds each way, that'd be $4 to $10 round trip. Sometimes it's a little bit higher. But in general, they'll fire that out, and they're testing basically 2 things. They're testing the appetite of other airlines, because guess what happens, and right after you fire out that and it hits the reservation systems, you're now on page 30 of shopping results all across the nation. That means people have to find you by actually looking for your name or looking for nonstops, and absolutely your bookings are going to go down. So they need the other airlines to come in behind them within a reasonable period of time, usually within a day and a half or so, before they have to start ditching. And they also want to see if consumers decide not to buy as many tickets. Now, you might be surprised, Ann, if they raise prices by $1, that can actually depress demand on certain routes, because everybody has a breaking point, right? There's a straw that breaks the camel's back, and some people say, "I'm just not taking that flight. It's $1 past my breaking point." So that does happen, and so they're testing both. And if all those things are in alignment, all the airlines start to match, and by the way, that would include Delta, United, American, Southwest, pretty much having to match. They're less inclined to worry about Virgin America, Alaska, and some of the others. Then if those airlines come in and bookings still seem to be okay, then those airfare hikes stick. Now, at 4 out of 14, I'm sitting here, in the Dallas area with my Texas Rangers making the playoffs again. That would be about a decent quality Major League Baseball hitter, about 280, 290 hitting. So in general, on the airlines, they're hitting pretty good on these things, especially if they continue to fire them out every month, which they have for the most part. As far as consumers are concerned, they're still firing off airfare sales, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday sales. So it's not like all the fares are higher. In fact, typically discount fares, and they're limited in time, usually between Tuesday and Thursday, they typically don't get these hikes applied to them.
Okay, well, I'm curious. Okay, it's fall. It's a season when a lot of people aren't particularly interested in flying because we've just had summer and Thanksgiving is coming up, two big flying periods. So why would they hike fares now, or even, attempt to hike fares now when people already don't want to fly much?
Well, I think a couple things. One, they're probing to see if it sticks or not. So this is more about if the other airlines are willing to come along. I think to some degree they know that, and we've seen announcements. I watch all the airline financial activity saying that their total unit revenue is going to be down year over year, 4 or 5%. They already know this is sort of baked into the cake. They're trying to shore that up a little bit and see mostly if probably they can squeeze those dollars out of business travelers, knowing that they're less inclined to worry about, let's say, a $2 one-way hike, for example, on a route, as opposed to leisure passengers who are very conscientious of price. So I think that's part of it. And in general, they tend to take turns. It's not just one airline that starts initiating hikes. We saw United before. Earlier in the year, we saw Southwest. Delta's tried several times. Many times, airlines blame JetBlue, although their route system is relatively small compared to the rest, and say that JetBlue started everything. So, in general, we see all the airlines participating in these particular hikes.
Will there be more attempts this year?
Oh yeah, I expect, we're sitting here in mid to late September. I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 or 3 more before the end of the year, hitting number 16. I've been doing this it was funny. I was looking at the chart today, 10 years now, and I've been tracking this. It's kind of scary. I've seen years where there's only been a few hikes back in 2008, 2009, when we had the fuel crisis and the recession. We had a whole bunch during the fuel crisis, and then hardly any after the recession the next couple of years. But in general, having about a dozen to 15 a year is sort of typical outside of crazy events that occur in the economy.
Well, let's switch from the airlines to airports. And I know that you have been talking a lot, or you've been asked questions a lot lately about the sorry state of the nation's airports. And some of them are sorry indeed. What's going on?
Yeah. Apparently, in last night's debate, there was quite a ruckus about how terrible airports are in the United States. I think the term third world was there. And I feel like I'm going to be Lloyd Vincent here. I've been to third world airports, and Newark, my sir, is not third world airport, but it's not great. Let's be honest here. These airports are long in the tooth. We do have airports across the United States like Las Vegas that have had billions of dollars pumped into them. We've seen there's great airports like in Salt Lake City that have all sorts of interesting things in them as well. But I would agree that there hasn't been a lot of money pumped in. There hasn't been a lot of money in the system. I will note, Ann, that there's what on everybody's ticket, they probably don't know this because it's in that sort of hidden section that says taxes and fees. There's what's called a passenger facility charge. It's typically $4.50 for every segment you take on your ticket. That's $16 for part of that. That money's earmarked for actual airport projects, related to airport projects. You could sort of take that into account. There's 2 million passengers today. If those are partially connecting flights, some of them are nonstop. You're looking at, literally tens of millions of dollars collected each day that are supposed to be earmarked to update the airports. And I want to ask a simple question. Where has that gone the last 7 or 8 years? Because some of these airports, when you go sit on a seat and it has 4, holes in it and a variety of places in certain airports, that it's not being spent there.
Yeah. And, you mentioned Las Vegas Airport, and I have always thought of that as like one of the good ones, but I never changed planes there before, except very recently. And the one connection was very late, and so we had to run. And I'll tell you, we ran and we ran and we ran, and we're pretty good sprinters, and we do a lot of hiking and stuff. Right. And we had to run uphill. I mean, there were 2 small sections of moving sidewalks, which we ignored because they were stuffed with people. But it was it was really hard to maneuver, and we got in on our plane by the skin of our teeth. And you know, and I'm not signaling out Las Vegas. Otherwise, it's a good airport, particularly if you want to drop some money. But
yeah, look, if you got a tight 35, 40-minute connection, you're landing. I've been to places like Miami where it's really tough to get from one end to the other easily. But if you sort of look at airports and you go, well, why isn't it as good as Singapore? Why isn't it as good as Dubai, for example? They only have one or two big airports in their entire country. We have dozens. That's one thing. And, you know, what would we have thought, for example, of the Atlanta airport after the Olympics several decades ago? It was probably the bright shining star. Now it's, you know, several decades later. Is it getting long in the tooth? Does it need a new coat of paint? Does it need to be updated? Of course it does. And that money should be spent to do that. You know, if you're going to Singapore, pretty much the only large airport in the country, they can concentrate all their revenue into that one airport. So, you know, I'm willing to give them a break, but I want to know where, I'll be honest, and I've been through lots of airports. I do see a lot of construction areas. The Dallas airport's been under construction. Houston, Hobby down in Houston's been under construction with new Southwest stuff. So airlines and airport boards and cities do. In fact, I've even heard Gary Kelly say that, you know, they're spending too much on airports and saying that some airports are, you know, basically edifices to the city government and a variety of other things, just driving up ticket prices because they expect airlines to foot the bill. So there's a little give and play in there as well.
We've got a good question from a customer. This is from Chelsea. Yeah. Chelsea in Denver. And she says, I love to travel. I get airfare alerts. I listen to your podcast. We love you too, Chelsea. And she loves that things seem to be cheaper than normal this year. First of all, she wants to know, is that an accurate statement? And she says, I would love to hop on a flight somewhere that's cheap for a week or so, but I'm a teacher and I have a very strict schedule for, you know, regarding when she's on break, and then the prices no longer seem cheap. Do you have any advice for a fourth grade teacher looking to travel for cheap during the school year or summer during those breaks, I assume?
Yeah, so let me unpack that a little bit here. First of all, that, you know, airfare does seem cheaper. That's absolutely true. We've seen oil prices down. We've seen the airlines announce that their unit revenue is going to be down as part of their forecasting for analysts. So we know prices are actually down year over year. So the definition of normal for me, because I'm a mathematician, has a little bit longer time scale than last year. Like, you know, how does it compare, for example, to 2008, 2009? After the recession, it's much higher than it was after the recession. We've seen prices sort of zoom up. We saw oil prices at the $100 barrel, now back, you know, as low as 30 recently, even this year. So, you know, and I would definitely say absolutely European prices right now. We've talked about that on previous podcasts.
Crazy good.
In the crazy good category, and there's lots of reasons for that, including you know, some jitters about terrorism, Brexit, also the strength of the dollar as well. So definitely those are all positive. So yes, the airfare does seem cheaper, and it's a perfect time to fly. And by the way, it's a perfect time of year to fly right now in the fall. We just finally broke 70 degrees here in the Dallas area. I'm counting my lucky stars here. So absolutely, you know, Chelsea, that is an accurate statement. As far as hopping on a flight somewhere cheap, you know, out of Denver, you're in one of the lucky cities because you've had historically competition between United and Frontier. More recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, Southwest has become dominant out of Denver, and all of them are competing on several nonstop flights. I actually did a radio show this morning in the Denver area and was looking at prices. And essentially, if you're paying over $200 right now outside of Thanksgiving and the Christmas time, which is the last couple of weeks in December, first week in January, you're paying too much for your airfare. Now, a lot of the cheapest airfares, as we mentioned earlier, on sort of crazy days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday travel days. I know there's some long holidays, weekends coming up, and fall breaks in some school systems. So I'm not sure if her particular school system has a fall break. But in the past, I know my family, when we've had fall break here, we've gone to places like Disney, for example, during that time frame. So there's definitely the ability. Come check out our deals pages. You can, if you just hop onto our website, if you go over to the My Trips page, you'll see the top 10 deals out of your city, and many of them are going to be, well, in fact, out of Denver, most of them are being under $200. Many of them you can still fly. For example, leaving on a Friday, coming back on a Sunday. That's the weekenders part of that. You know, if you're trying to get away over a teacher's in-service holiday or something like that. Well, I guess they'd have to go to school and in-service, but
teachers might have to be there.
Yeah, but well, I'm going to stick my tongue, my foot in my mouth here or there. But if you have a bit of a holiday coming up there where you have everybody being off, for example, the first couple of days of Thanksgiving week, I know some schools get Thanksgiving week off. That week before, leaving on a Friday, for example, evening, coming back on a Tuesday would be a great time to fly during that time frame. You can also get to warm weather destinations, so there's plenty of you know, and it's really funny. I was thinking about teachers in service because the last 2 weeks I've been studying Khan Academy videos on physics because I'm tutoring my daughter in physics. If it wasn't for Sal Khan, I'd be in a bit of trouble because it's been 30 years since I looked at some of these problems. So yeah, the teachers have, let me put it this way. As a teacher, I love what they're doing for my kids. And I do know when you have in-service, you actually have to show up at school.
One thing I was thinking of, and this is because I'm looking at deals day in and day out, and you know, a lot of what I do is selecting good ones. And because you've been talking about Europe and how cheap it is, I've paid special attention to those. Thanksgiving might be a good time to go to Europe. We have seen deals. It's a terrible time to fly within the U.S., as we all know, because you know that's when. If Chelsea doesn't have any family obligations and maybe she's got a pal or a sibling that would love to go to Europe, Thanksgiving might be a good time to go.
You'd be surprised, actually. I guess it's been 4 or 5 years ago. They actually were running a business class sale out of Houston. So actually, my wife and daughter and I flew down to Houston on Southwest and then took at the time, continental flight. I guess that was 7 years ago. And they had that business class fare for about $1,200 round trip, which typically would have been $4,000 or $5,000. So we decided to go during Thanksgiving. Now, the weather was a little chilly in London area, but the people were still relatively friendly. It was fun to move around the city and actually be away. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a little chilly, and if you can get away a little bit earlier, that would be great as well. I know that some people's fall breaks actually land in October. That's probably a little bit better time from a weather perspective. But you could go a little bit further south, for example, and you could go into the south of Spain, for example, several places in the south of Italy. You can also head over to Greece, for example. It's a little bit warmer there. You catch a little bit better weather there. And the cool thing about that time of year is that all the locals are back from their summer vacations. And remember, their summer vacations aren't just a day or two, they're an entire month sometimes over in Europe. Wouldn't it be great if we all had those? And so it's a great time to visit, and I agree with you. Also, you know, whether you're going cold or warm, you're going to see a big influx of people going from cold to warm. So sometimes it's great to go from warm to cold as well.
And thank you, Chelsea, for your question. If anybody else has a question, please send it to customer.service@faircompare.com. Now we've got an event of the week, and this is a good one.
Yeah, you know, my daughter's been, she's telling me how cool it is to have, you know, haunted house and Halloween and some of these crazy actors that they have at these haunted houses.
Yeah.
Those aren't like the haunted houses I went to where you had Uncle Fred sort of screaming from behind a curtain. These things are crazy. Yeah. The makeup is unbelievable. And this one happens to be in Salem. Now, you know, there's a show on Fox that I've been watching for a couple of years now that's sort of set back and has all sorts of weird and wonderful creatures in it. I let other people figure out what the name of that show is. But I actually love that show. I have to admit, I'm a comic book junkie and I sort of love those things. And I've even watched, I was watching Shark Tank, I think a couple of years ago, where I think one of the companies that was on Shark Tank was one of these ones that do these sort of year-round crazy Halloween shows and got funded by Mark Cuban as one of those things. So these things are spectacular. And this one in Salem, I was looking at the pictures and just looking at a couple of the old churches that, you know, one of the museums that's sitting there, I was a little bit chill just looking at some of those things.
I just want to say, for people that don't really care about Halloween or aren't into haunted houses and stuff, I have been to Salem. It is a beautiful little town. It is just gorgeous. You will enjoy it no matter for what reason you go. But, you know, it's the place for witches and haunting, surely, but it's also just lovely.
Yeah, so whether you're going to Salem or, all right, I'll say it's Sleepy Hollow, but a variety of places. And by the way, I'm not heading to Sleepy Hollow anytime soon after watching that show over the last few years. You know, in general, these events are awesome. They do span the entire month of October, so you don't have to go in any particular weekend. You can go really from early October all the way to Halloween itself, and definitely check that out. And by the way, during that time frame, you'll find really inexpensive tickets into places like Boston, which are fairly close by.
It sounds great. Anyway, thank you, Rick. And if people want more information, what should they do?
Yeah, just send us a note at customer.service@faircompare.com. I appreciate Chelsea sending us a note today, and I appreciate the kind words. It's always good to hear back from that, and hopefully she'll check out a few of those deals that we have listed. And you know, you can always sign up. We'll send you deals every week as well. It's a great place to do that. And check out our native app. You can download that, Adventurist. Just say Fair Compare or Adventurist on either Google Play or the App Store on iOS, and you can download that app, and you can check out the Salem event along with, I think, almost 260 events now that we've been tracking.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Ed.